And we are back on the Zero Hour. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and you might have heard stories in the last couple weeks about Facebook and accusations that Facebook is biased in the way it handles news feeds. Now, this is the kind of story that we're very interested in here on this program, and helping us explore its implications is Zeynep Tufekci. Zeynep is a techno-sociologist and a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. She's also an assistant professor in the School of Information and Library Science at the University of North Carolina. She's faculty associate at the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, and is a former fellow at the Center for Internet Technology Policy at Princeton University. Her research revolves around politics, civics, movements, privacy, and surveillance, as well as data and algorithms. And she's the author of a recent piece about the real bias built into Facebook. She joins us now. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. I wanted to talk to you through with you a little bit this whole issue of real bias built into Facebook. You wrote the opinion piece for the Times about it, and you said Facebook is biased. That's true, but not in the way conservative critics say it is. And what did you mean by that?
So the latest brouhaha was over the trending topics box that is on desktop Facebook, and it's not even very visible on mobile. And the claim was the people who were doing the last step curation, in which they took topics that were surfaced by Facebook as frequently discussed on the site, and they cleaned it up a little, and they decided on news sources to link to. The claim was that at the last step, they were biased against some conservative outlets like Breitbart.com. Now, I have no inside information. Facebook denies the allegation. The claim is anonymous and seems to be sourced to one person. But my concern wasn't with that, because, to be honest, the trending topics box is not very important. And whether there's some human vetting at the last minute doesn't seem to be very significant. And even if there is, if they're doing a bit of quality control, as Facebook said, to try to make sure that hoaxes and fake news doesn't make it to trending topics, that's fine with me. The real bias I'm concerned with Facebook is the newsfeed algorithm. And that's the part, when you think of Facebook, it's not trending topics that you use. You use the newsfeed, which is this feed that shows you the updates from your friends, your acquaintances, whoever is your Facebook friend, as well as from pages you follow. Now, there are a lot of people saying that they're just seeing what their friends are posting or what the pages they're following are posting when they log on. That is not the case at all. What you instead have is an algorithm that is programmed to optimize the number of clicks and shares and likes and comments on the site, that is choosing through this opaque and proprietary way to show you some things and bury the other things. So that's why you have lots of baby pictures in your feed. Baby pictures are very likable because, a friend of yours posts their child's picture, you click on like, and the algorithm just shows you more because it's geared to maximize the likes. The problem with such a setup, with likes and comments and shares being valued, the whole thing is the game is played on a game ground that's designed by Facebook. So you have a like button, but you don't have this is an important but troubling story button, for example. On Facebook, I believe that conservative sites do just fine. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook CEO, in response to the allegations, said that Fox News, which is active on Facebook, generates more engagement than any other news site. And I actually believe this. I think it's totally plausible. I believe that Facebook is perfectly open to all sorts of ideas that might not be liked by even its programmers, but that's not how Facebook operates. It operates through this algorithm. And also, we learned that Donald Trump, for example, has more Facebook likes and engagement than any other presidential candidate by far. So my concern was what happens when you have an environment where 30-40% of the U.S. public is now getting news from, especially among young people, that controls the news and updates that you see for more than 1 billion people around the world. So this is not just a U.S. thing. But the algorithm itself is pretty significantly tilted towards viral and clicky and upbeat or quarrelsome, because comments are also valued by the algorithm. So that's why you're seeing all those arguments on your feed about things like the Black Lives Matter movement, because engagement is what Facebook is trying to maximize. And in fact, in one
if I can jump in for a second,
yes.
Zeynep. I'll tell you what dominates my feed right now is bitter arguments between Clinton and Sanders supporters.
Mine too.
And that would be part of the process too. So, and you mentioned, by the way, that Facebook, doesn't allow you to tag a story as, for example, disturbing but important. They added these extra things besides like. Now you have a heart and a laughing face and a crying face and an angry face and a face a surprise face, I guess, I don't know. And I'm not an emoticon kind of guy, but I guess what you're saying then is that they're really manipulating what you see and hear in order to maximize engagement rather than, for example, a genuine connection or the dissemination of information or what have you. Is that part of your concern?
My concern is that the algorithm is non-transparently picking what to show you, and it's not done in a way that is at all accountable to us. I mean, there was a brouhaha, so therefore we heard about the trending topics, but the algorithm is tweaked all the time too, and we don't really know. One of the stories I documented that I wrote in my Times op-ed is the algorithm in August of 2014 helped bury the Ferguson news on Facebook because the story wasn't, it wasn't algorithm friendly at all. It's a African-American teenager gets shot by the police under circumstances that are murky with conflicting testimony and some claims that he had his hands up. I mean, that's obviously not something you can like. And it's also not something that was easy to comment on at the time because, the facts weren't clear either. But there's a lot of feelings around it. So basically, instead of that, the news of that week got dominated by something you might remember if you're on Facebook, the Ice Bucket Challenge for ALS, a charity drive, which is certainly worthy. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was the algorithm-friendly, upbeat, networky, clicky, virally story completely cut out what has turned into a difficult but necessary conversation in this country about race and policing. So that's the problem I have with algorithms choosing what to show us in this manner. Not that there's a way not to choose anything, because there's a lot of things. There has to be a way to choose what you see or what you don't. But when it's done in this way, and when it's fine-tuned to optimize engagement in an ad-financed platform, and when that platform is basically without alternative for lots of people because that's where everybody else is, so where are you going to go? I feel like that creates a pretty worrisome picture, especially if you consider that it's not just the U.S., it's more than 1 billion people.
Yeah, I think just, to kind of parse out some of the issues here, and we're talking with Zeynep Tufekci, a sociologist, about the algorithms that drive Facebook. I think when we try to parse those out, what we find is a couple issues here. One, I think there's a kind of fetishization of algorithms themselves. I think the idea that somehow they're impartial, they're neutral, they're magical, they're ways to connect, one person to another. But I think the second is transparency, the fact that we don't know what they actually do, and I think the third is the idea that they're, and I think this gets to the third gets to the root of what, if I understand your concern correctly, that they're actually altering the information we receive about the world and the interactions we have with others. They're altering that for of more than 1 billion people in ways we don't know and can't understand, but in ways that could be omitting very important.
Yes, in ways that are quite complex. So it's not that, what's happening isn't that Facebook's engineers, don't like conservatives and therefore they're creating this thing. No, because the Facebook feed is quite friendly to the conservative causes as well. It's also not that they're thinking, oh, let's bury the Ferguson news. In fact, I bet they were surprised by this, but that's what happens when you have this complex, unaccountable process, programmed by a few people without this kind of oversight. And it's not to say, traditional media is not biased. It is, but at least there, we're not under this illusion that just because it's using computation, it's all objective. And we have a whole host of, infrastructure from public editors and ombudspeople to media watchdogs to all sorts of different institutions that try to hold media accountable because, being able to decide what people see and what they don't is real power. It's not a small amount of power. Because of the Facebook's dominance, it means that there's really no easy answer to the problem.
Yeah, I think this is really important, and we're talking with Zeynep Tufekci, sociologist, about this. And what I was trying to get at with a comment about the fetishization of algorithms is that I noticed that I've seen this in a number of different places, but in this case, in this issue of Facebook, one of the ways that conservatives expressed outrage about this was, saying, in effect, they said it was an algorithm, but it was really people deciding, as if an algorithm is anything more than a human artifact, maybe that's operating independently and that people don't understand, but somehow as if an algorithm couldn't be biased. We know when we watch the news media that the news media may be biased, but somehow I think people invest algorithms or digital technology in general with a kind of qualities it doesn't possess, like objectivity. Does that make sense to you?
When there's no right answer, there can't be objectivity. It's not like flying a plane or building a bridge where you have a right answer. When you're deciding what to show people, there is no right answer. It doesn't matter how much math you use. You have to grapple with these questions of, values and considerations and what kind of content are you promoting and what kind you're not. So there's no getting around it just because there's some numbers involved in the calculation.
Right. If I edit a newspaper, If I edit a newspaper and I leave out a story about poverty because I think it's depressing and I won't sell my newspaper, I'm open to criticism. But if I'm Facebook and I've designed the algorithm to maximize likes and engagements, which means I don't talk about Ferguson, I would argue, and perhaps you would argue too, that is something we should be talking about as well.
Yes, we should really be thinking about how do you deal with this new world where you have gatekeepers, and it's not just Facebook. I wrote about Facebook, but this kind of machine intelligence decision making is coming to so many fields, from hiring to education to many other things. So it's a big problem.
Yeah, and you get into every time you interact with it, it collects more information about you, and that may affect even how much you're charged when you order something online. You may be charged more and so on. So I don't know that there's a neat way to wrap up this conversation, really, except to say, and I'd like to get your closing thoughts on this, except to say that this is something I think you've done a service by surfacing it as an issue in the New York Times. I think it's something we should be talking about a lot more. And I guess in closing, Zeynep Tufekci, I would ask, have we given a sort of undeserved immunity to social media and technology from being discussed in this way? And is it time to really push that conversation?
Yeah, I really think it is, because I think we're sort of thinking by analogy, thinking this is like automation and where you have laws of nature and science and math to guide us. We don't. We brought computation to the messy, complex human affairs. So what's happening is that the messy complexity of human affairs is just invading that area too, and there's no getting around it, and we shouldn't at all be under the sort of illusion that if Facebook was just using computation to make these decisions, as it is with the newsfeed, it's somehow objective. It's not. It's not biased in the way humans are. It's biased in its own particular way, and it's very important for us to try to dig into that as a real issue.
Great. Well, I think that's a great summary. So Zeynep Tufekci, technosociologist, contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.